We're going to start the meeting. Call the meeting to order. If you can take a seat, please. It's May 12th, 2009. And will you please stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance with us? Thanks.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will you please call the roll?
Council Agency Member Falcone. Francisco.
Here.
Horton. House.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Mayor Chair Bloom. Item number 1, proclamation declaring May 17th to the 23rd as National Public Works Week.
And I see we have a whole group of people here. We'll talk about that in just a second, but let me read the proclamation first. It says, whereas public works services are integral to our everyday lives, as the health, safety, and comfort of this community greatly depends on these facilities and services. Support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of the city's public works systems and programs such as water, sewers, streets, highways, public buildings, and solid waste collection. The quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, is vitally dependent on the efforts and skill of our Public Works Department personnel. The American Public Works Association National Public Works Week 2009 theme is Revitalize, Reinvest, and Renew. An example of the city's coordination with this theme is our use of the new materials and methods to increase energy effectiveness in city facilities. So I, as Mayor of Santa Barbara, do hereby proclaim May 17th to 23rd as National Public Works Week, and we call upon the citizens, all citizens, and civic organizations to recognize the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize the contributions which public work employees make every single day to our health, safety, comfort, and our quality of life. So thank you very much. And before I turn the microphone over to you, I just want to thank. We're going to be thanking firefighters, of course, over the next couple of weeks, and our police officers and so on. But I just wanted to thank the public works people too. We don't often think about you as emergency workers, but you really are, and we know that. The example of taking the pump, which I think was your thing, up to on Northridge, when Northridge was really under a lot of assault, and the firefighters needed more water, taking that pump up there and actually showing them how to use it too, which was, just a very wonderful thing. So I thank you so much for doing that. That had to do with our water supply and the pressure too up there. And also Mission Canyon, it says here, and I'm just going to read this, it says here that we're having trouble keeping up with the demand for water because a lot of the residents in Mission Canyon turned on their sprinklers or turned on their hoses and then left. And, you know, for me, for one property owner, that sounds like a good idea. But when a whole bunch of people do that, it's really hard on the water supply. And so the level in the reservoir at the top of Tunnel Road was dropping. And if nothing was done, staff expected to run out of water in 3 hours. And water staff responded. They went home, to each home and turned the sprinklers off. And the result was not only did the water in the reservoir stop dropping, but they were able to increase the level there, providing vital water for fire suppression. So it makes a huge difference to have the support of the Public Works people, and I just want to thank you. This is fortuitous that this week is Public Works Week, but I think it points out the very important nature of Public Works and what you all do every day. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. I just want to acknowledge the staff that are here today from Public Works. If you could stand. And this is Rick. This is Rick Marshall. He got the short straw in having to come and stand up here with me as a representative. But the timing is fortuitous, I think, to really recognize and appreciate the role that Public Works plays in supporting and being directly involved in a lot of the emergency activities that we're required to respond to as a city. And I think in this particular event, the streets crews support the police department in evacuation and blocking streets and providing barricades and just being a resource to call upon and to respond to as we do and I think do an excellent job of. In the fire in particular, the Hesesitu fire seemed to be one that was particularly challenging for water pressure issues. And the fact that Cater, our water treatment plant, was within the evacuation area from day one. So we had staff who continued to operate the plant and had to evacuate the plant actually for a brief period of time on Thursday night, and continue to keep our water quality intact and the operation of the plant continuously going, and the opportunities to be able to work very collaboratively with the fire department in maintaining water supply and water pressure was really important in the EOC and on the ground. And I really want to acknowledge the hard work, the dedication, and the strength of the technical skill and ability that our staff represent in being able to jump in, forecast where they need to be, and be ready to respond or be in front of the problem before it actually exists. So I want to thank the department staff that are here and those that aren't here as well for their dedication and continued support for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I know we have one change to the agenda. Go ahead, Mr. Armstrong.
Yes, Madam Mayor. We have an ex-agenda item that came up after the preparation of the agenda, and that's a briefing today by the, starting with Chief DiMizio and some of the CAL FIRE folks and others who were involved with the incident that we had. As you recall, last Tuesday afternoon, the fire had just started, and we brought Andy in for a brief presentation on the status of the fire. At that point, I think the fire was about an hour old. And, of course, it consumed our organization as well as many others for most of or all of last week. And it still consumes us. And we thought it was important to give you a current briefing on where things are and how the incident works. So, and I believe it takes five votes from the City Council to put this on the agenda.
Okay, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's to put this on the agenda. So let's put it on right now because we have everybody here. So I don't know who to call on first.
I think I'll start with Chief DiMizio. Do you want to introduce folks?
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm Andy DiMizio, your interim fire chief. Here to provide a briefing for you regarding the status of the T fire. I'd like to provide you with the following a brief update on the status as of 0700 this morning. an opportunity to, this gives me an opportunity to introduce the Unified Command members, including the Incident Commander from California Team 4, and let them give their perspectives on the situation, and also to answer any questions that there might be, provide a brief overview on how Unified Command works within the Incident Command System to manage these kind of large-scale fires. As of this morning, the Hezecita fire had burned just a little bit over 8,700 acres, and the fire was not growing. It was a static fire at this time. The containment was, for the line around it, it was reached at 80% at that time, and they're hoping for 100% containment by tomorrow. Now, there's a big difference between containment and control. There's still hot spots in the area. Thank you, Marcel. The predicted weather for today, you can see the weather has changed, and it's predicted to get hotter and drier, and they're predicting sundowner winds. Winds to be from the north, 15 to 20 miles an hour, but perhaps gusts up to 45. So that's caused some concerns that the fire line will be tested. Let's see if I can work this. Excuse me. In this area, if the winds come from the northwest this direction, there is still concern for this area on the eastern flank and this area on the western flank, although the crews have done just a fantastic job getting in there. So their strategy today is to get into all these areas within, the black line is within the controlled lines, and you can see the top part is that red area. That's uncontrolled, so there's still uncontrolled line at the top, and there are hot spots in this area. So they're getting crews in there to put that fire out, and they're doing a very, very good job at doing that. Let's see, the total of firefighter forces, they're up to 3,100 now. They've actually gone down a little bit, so they're starting to let some forces go, but they're maintaining control of all the important things. They're just maneuvering the forces. That would include over 48 engine strike teams. There are 12 helicopters, 8 fixed wings, and still over 39 strike teams of crews. So they have a lot of hand crews to get into those tough areas. At this time, I'd like to invite Battalion Chief Pat McElroy to come up, and Pat was our first on-scene incident commander. Pat can tell you a little bit about his perspectives, what he saw when he first arrived on scene, and named this the Hezecita fire. Chief Pat McElroy.
And I wanted to thank you for your work because you were there all the time. Anytime I was there, you were there. So I know it was a big
I was
big deal.
evacuated, so it helped.
Oh, there you go. Evacuated to Earl Warren Showgrounds, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Mayor and Council, first I want to thank Chief DiMizio for giving not only me but our whole team a lot of support. He and Chief Sylvie stepped into some new positions this week, and I don't think that they anticipate that 12 hours into their tenure we'd be where we are. But anyway, here we are. As Danny was saying, I was dispatched at about 1:30 on last Tuesday, and what I'd like to talk about a little bit is the whole concept of unified command, and how we got to where we are. How does Earl Warren look like it does? How does Live Oak Camp over in the valley look like it does? How does Elling Park look like it does? How does Mackenzie Park? All these things come together, and within minutes or immediately on coming on scene, I ran into Mark Schmidt, who is here as a unified commander for the county. I was at a public works facility, and I had a police sergeant. We were all arriving at the same time. Chief Schmidt and I immediately recognized that we had to involve the Forest Service, and so we immediately started building on the idea of unity and command. And why this is important is, like it says, and I'll just read through this, it enables all the agencies to manage an incident together, and we come up with a common set of objectives and strategies, and those are worked on every day. The objectives and strategies and change on a daily basis. So once one is achieved or it moves lower in the priority scale, all that stuff is evaluated every day. And it allows us to make joint decisions. And we work very, very well, I think, in that regard. As a group, we've been very collegial and tried to respect each other's interests and and each agency's interests and bias, and try to make it work together. And it maintains a unity of command, and so that that if whether I'm working for the county, whether I'm working for the city, whether I'm working for the city of San Diego or San Francisco and I'm here, the direction is clear, the information's clear, and the communication is clear. Next one, girl. We end up with a single integrated incident organization. We shared the facilities, in this case, usually, ideally, it's one facility. In this case, the nature of the incident dictated that we share them. We have a single planning process, and I believe most of you have seen an incident action plan. Ann Marks, our wildland specialist for the city of Santa Barbara, was responsible for the first one that was developed the night before. And what this does is it's a guidebook to each operational period. It includes our safety message, where everybody is, how we'll be talking to each other, the weather forecast, and gives everybody in the organization an idea of where they'll be participating during the course of the day. And it also coordinates the process for resource ordering. It's an instant business. And I mean, we're already independently in business, but we're doing a huge corporate merger on the fly. And so it gives us a way to figure out how we're going to pay for this, and that's real critical. And the key members of this team are sitting behind us. And I'd like to have Chief DiMizio. I was going to do this. I'd like to have Chief DiMizio come up and introduce these guys. They're really important to us. But before I do that, I want to say how instantly the other parts of this city came together. I'm talking about Public Works, the police department. Every branch of this city was involved in this operation very early on. And Rick, I don't know if he's still from Public Works, I kept up going on these canyons on fire, and there's this guy with the beard in the Public Works truck going, I got the water going. So it was,
Yeah.
So it was great to see him repeatedly through the incident. But anyway, thank you very much, Chief DiMizio.
Okay. Chief.
Could you go to the next slide, Carol, please? Next one. This is just the organizational chart to give you a brief visual overview of things, and you can see how it all comes together. And down there in the command staff, you'd also list a safety liaison and public information. So that's where the information officer would tie in. I just wanted to give that visual to you. But no, it is a distinct pleasure of mine and in my brief career as a fire chief to welcome these gentlemen.
Your week and a half.
Because I was sure glad to see them. And from the first night, Mark Schmidt was there from Santa Barbara County, Unified IC from Santa Barbara County.
Thank you.
Dana,
Thank you.
Division Chief Dana DeAndrea from Forest Service. We've worked so well together, and once again, made me feel so good to see you there. And Terry McElway from Montecito. Our brother firefighters from Montecito were critical to saving the eastern, our eastern flank would be their western flank on the second day of the fire when it blew out to the west there. And most importantly, when I saw Cal Team number 4 come in, we had a Type 1 team, so I knew that we would get an umbrella on this and some good organization. So I'd like to invite Joe Waterman, the incident commander from California Team 4, to the microphone. And from my deepest heart, Joe, thank you. Our pleasure. These guys are doing a great job.
Thank you, Dan.
Wow. Thank you.
Sure.
That's overwhelming. So I'll try not to get too emotional here. I've held it together pretty good on the television for the last week, so we'll
Yeah,
see
you
how I
have.
do here. Thank you very much for having us in. Wow, that was a great lesson on Unified Command. That's like textbook out of our academy. That's awesome. And, you know, Unified Command is kind of a complex animal. Just imagine throwing one player from a bunch of the NFL teams all on one team together with no coach and go turn them loose on the Super Bowl. And it's similar with this. All of our departments, and not just fire, but police, all of us get ICS training, Incident Command System training. And that's what brings us through this, is the system that we employ and the seriousness that agencies take in that training. And it's apparent to me, I mean, I've done this for some 30 years, 30 plus years. I'll date myself if I go any further. But the cooperation level of training, skill, and the heart of the servants of this community are very apparent. So just been a true pleasure working with these men in a short amount of time. Before us we have what we call a fire progression map. You've seen a operations map we had before. If I could address the areas that we're looking at with the uncontrolled line that you saw up in this general area. That's an extremely rough and rugged country. Those of you who have been in the area, you know what I'm talking about. A lot of cliffs. Even though the line is unsecured in that area, we put a lot of work in there with retardant aircraft, and we do have crews in there chipping line in where they can. That's where some of these injuries that have surfaced lately are the twisted ankles and little cuts and things from falling down because it's steep in there and rugged, and they're a little tired too. They've been here for a while. So even though it shows as unsecured line, we're looking at 80% containment. We're probably going to move that containment date that we had picked for tomorrow out, and that's not because of progress, that's because of the weather conditions. We base all of our actions on current and expected fire behavior, and weather is a big part of that decision-making process. So if you see that date go from the 13th to the 14th or 15th, I got to look at some weather predictions. It's solely because of that. We want to be prepared to catch this incident should anything materialize. I can say that this is in as secure a position as it can be at this time. We have lots of resources stashed, ready to go in an organized fashion to handle not only anything that happens on this incident, but any new starts that might occur through this wind event. We're planning out ahead to help our brothers and sisters in all of the areas up and down this front country. And so we're prepared as we can be to handle that. And what we're showing here is the basic, this little chart shows how much expansion the incident had by operational period or by day over time. This big red area that you see depicted here, that's all that Thursday night second evening blow that we had with the Sundowners. Just a tremendous amount of acreage covered in a very short amount of time, which of course involved all the evacuations with sheriff and local law enforcement and public works and everyone working together, not only getting people out of the way, but as we've heard, to keep the water pressure up. So we had water to fight fire with and all those issues. And then knowing that the EOCs were going, the information's flowing, a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. A lot of moving parts, as we say in the business. And the moving parts work very well together in this case. So that's just a depiction of kind of the series of the magnitude that we had. The incident, as Chief said, is in a pretty good state right now, 80% containment. And we're looking at 100% here in the next few days. This wind event's kind of got us held off a little bit for that progress. So 28 firefighter injuries to date. We've got about 3,000 people on the line. A lot of folks. If I could, I'd just like to give a little explanation and kind of how we move in. You've heard a little bit about the initial and extended attack that we do, or that was done, the formation of the Unified Command, and then there's this interjection of a crazy thing called a CAL FIRE team. We come in to lend management and command and control expertise. We do not just fire. A matter of fact, a couple of my fellow team ICs have been working with the swine flu distribution of the national stockpile of medicines because of the coordination and organization that we picked up through fire control. So a lot of expertise there. So we're used in a lot of different missions. So when we come in, we unify. And probably the biggest question I get is, why the red hats? Why are you guys in red hats? You know, we're kind of a service organization as well. And when we want to be readily identifiable for people at the incident base or wherever, it's like, oh, there's a team member. I know I got something I can go handle. And we get it channeled and taken care of immediately. So we don't wear these all the time as a part of our normal uniform, just on our team deployments. So that's why the red hats. The other thing I wanted to hit on briefly is, you're probably wondering, who's watching the fire? We're all here. I've got a very capable deputy IC that we carry on the team. I've got roughly 45 people in different functions on this command team, and then we pull in all the local expertise that's here for success. And this, I've got to be honest with you. I've done this for a while. They don't all go this smooth, especially with this type of expansion in a short amount of time. So you should be very pleased with your public servants in this area. They are right on. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Before I conclude the presentation, I'd just like to mention that a town hall community meeting is planned for Thursday night at 7 o'clock at La Cumbre Middle School. So we hope to, if there's more questions, or we plan on presenting an operational overview to the public at that time. And this concludes the briefing.
Okay. And that meeting will be conducted by the fire department, and that's the idea, is to have the fire explain to people so they can understand exactly. They have some questions. We'll all be on the same page then.
That's
Is that
correct,
right?
yeah.
Okay. Good. That's on Thursday evening, 7 o'clock, La Cumbre.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we have some folks who have questions. Mr. Williams and then Mr. House. Go ahead.
Well, I'll save my questions actually for Thursday night because I know it was going to take a lot. But I just know that all of us just want to express the thanks to all of you and all of your men, and especially the firefighters that got injured in this work. So that's all I wanted to do is express my thanks to you.
Thank you, Mr. House.
Well, I did have a question about today, and knowing that the weather is always unpredictable in a sense. And so what should the public expect in terms of updates over this evening and the next couple of days? Where would they turn to get information, or what do you intend to do to get information out?
I'm going to have to turn to the experts here and see what the latest update schedule is for public information.
For a while, we were doing twice-a-day press briefings, but I
Right.
don't know now. Yeah. Mr.
Well,
Waterman?
as you're probably aware, we stopped the evening press briefings last evening because the feeling of the need of the media and ourselves was that the incident was kind of winding down, other than the wind event and potential, of course. But the normal flow of information that we've been establishing, there are still information bulletins going out, should be to the EOCs via the mass mailings, all those types of things. And then I know your local governments have established great contacts on the internet. So those sites will still be fed. And, of course, if anything were to happen, the normal activation process for those evacuation process, all that would just start all over again, just dovetail right
Just the
back.
reverse 911 and all those kinds of things if something like that.
If something like that were to occur, absolutely.
Very good. Well, great. Thank you. And I think we're all going to really benefit from that gathering as a community. So Thursday, 7 o'clock at La Cumbre Middle School.
That's correct.
And the public at large is welcome to attend and invited to come and listen.
Correct.
Right. Very good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. I started to make a little list of people to thank, and I used up a whole page, and I was turning to the second page. I mean, it's just totally amazing. You know, the school district opened up Dos Pueblos High School, and the Red Cross, and then even the UCSB chancellor. You know, it's just opening a place out there for everybody. So, Red Cross and so on. Senator Barbara Boxer's office called, said they would like to help. Congresswoman Capps, Assemblymember Nava, I mean, everybody. And then I've been getting, there's an advantage sometimes to being in the mayor's office, because I've gotten messages from all over the world, from Germany, from France, from Hiroshima, Japan, from the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Just to let you know, the support is totally amazing. Got one today from Bowling Green, Kentucky. The mayor wanted to know if she could help us. And I didn't know how, but just knowing that she's thinking that really does help. So, there are things like that going on. So it's just very wonderful. And I know the Children's Festival is this Saturday, just to let you all know. We have a Children's Festival at Alameda Park, and the children want to make something, and I don't know what it's going to be. We're trying to figure that out to thank the firefighters and everybody. So hopefully most of the firefighters will be home by then. I don't know if that can happen, but we can send something to your homes then, just to thank you, because the community is really thankful. I've been in places. I was in a restaurant the other day, and some firefighters came in, and the spontaneous applause. It's totally amazing. But thank you so much for everything. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for giving me the time to show how many people it does take to do this. And
Isn't it amazing?
How many thanks are in order? So.
Yeah, just a whole truckload for laundry down at the Earl Warren Showgrounds. I mean, when you think about what it takes to keep 4,000 people going and more. So thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Waterman, for coming in.
Thank you,
Okay.
many chiefs.
Yeah, many chiefs is right. That's right. Okay. Now we got to get on with the regular business. Are there any other changes to the agenda, Mr.? Okay, didn't think so. We have some public comment. Ruth Bruce Wilson, we'll start with you, and then Kate Smith. So let me, the microphone's still on there.
Good afternoon, Madam
Good
Mayor
afternoon.
and City Council members. Boy, it started last Tuesday.
That's right.
And we didn't know how much was going to happen. But all I can say is we were right in the thick of it that Thursday night on Northridge Road.
Yes.
And all the little details, we saw how this operation was working.
Yeah.
And we are so grateful. There was so much kindness, so much capability, so much reassurance from the officials. And, you know, at one point my car was stuck and I couldn't start it, and they were evacuating the road. And I'm telling you, I never had my car started that fast before. and everyone right down the line, you know, it was just like, thank you. And when we first saw you up on the news, it was so good because we know you, right? There you were, and there you were, and there you were. And it was so reassuring how the whole thing was handled. I'm so proud of our city, you as leaders, and, you know, the fire department, the police department, public works, everybody. Now, could we just keep this spirit? It's like the spirit of 9/11 was, where everyone you meet is reaching out and caring, whether it's a woman with a tray of cupcakes or, you know, just all the little signs on our block. One little boy put out 2 fire trucks and his own sign, you know. If we could just keep this going. And I do want to say that there was a concerted effort for prayer for Santa Barbara. And I can't begin to tell you how far away, it was like you talking about internationally even. Thank God, because there were moments there. We thought for sure our home was gone. And yes, the firefighters did an amazing, awesome job. But God was there. And there was that moment when Jack said he looked at the hill and he was up part of the way up there. He said, our house is going to go. And the wind shifted just slightly. And so I want to pray right now. Thank you, God, for watching over us, that you were in this and that you care about us so much, Lord, and that the fire never went below Foothill, that it didn't wipe out our city, Lord, and that everyone was there to do their job. And Lord, we do ask for healing for those firefighters, the 3 especially, who are seriously injured. And we do trust in you, and we just reach out in thanks to you, God. Please lift up the City Council, give them renewed energy after this ordeal, and help them in all their work. And all the officials involved, Lord, I ask your blessing on them, all of them, every one of those people out there helping us at this time. And help us, Lord, to keep the spirit going, that we would keep this generous, loving, caring nature in all of our endeavors. In Jesus' name, amen.
Kate Smith will be next, followed by Elizabeth Anderson.
Members of the Santa Barbara City Council, I do believe God is with us and that Santa Barbara will rise from the ashes like the phoenix. My home on Gibraltar Road, Flores Flat, the sacred site of the Chumash Indians, the old Sunburst, was adopted by the firefighters when we were surrounded by fire. They cannot come into the compound, which has about 20 very odd, very eccentric, unpermitted homes. Several men stayed behind to find the evacuation orders, and they hid from the police. These are mountain men. They would piss on the fire before they would run away from it. I sent the fire department up to evacuate them, and they adopted the property. And I will be returning home hopefully, tonight. My Mission Canyon home is 4 doors up from the Mission, and I really believed that the National Guard and President Obama's Air Force One jet would be turned into a Borade bomber before Santa Barbara would allow the fire to come that close to our treasured, priceless mission. It is obvious now to everybody that my disqualification from the Santa Barbara School Board ballot was an illegal and foolish retaliatory tactic. They said I lived in the Santa Ynez Valley School District. I am taking them to court this Friday. It's the beginning of several court proceedings that will expose school corruption and a very serious public employment complex. Last week I stated that the Gang Task Force Leadership Council was engaged in treason. They called their work vector control and explained that the sum total of their work for the last 8 months was the compilation of an inventory of nonprofits dealing with the youth. The school-to-prison pipeline is institutionalized racism and child abuse. Last week, Newt Gingrich called the nation to attend this Saturday's rally in Washington, D.C. for the 55th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, and he echoed my words. Our schools are failing our children. This is high treason. It's now been declared by ACLU, NAACP, and Marian Wright Edelman's Children's Defense Fund that the government is involved in treasonous acts. Please visit SantaBarbaraSchoolTalk.com, and I want you to know that the $400,000 allocated to the city administrator from the OES Cal GRIP, which even you did not know what it stood for, I am demanding that that money be returned to the Office of Emergency Services, that it be reallocated. I am pursuing the fact that it was misappropriated, that it was an underhanded and illegal dispensation to the Gang Task Force. Not even you knew what it stood for. Not even you know what it's going to.
Could you wind up right now? Thank you.
You have no clue how to reduce or prevent youth violence, and in fact, the school-to-prison pipeline and the unholy alliance between the schools and the law enforcement, that is creating youth violence, and we need to tend to our people. Thank you so much.
Elizabeth Anderson will be followed by Dinah Wilson.
Honorable Mayor Bloom and City Council members, I just wanted to come back and thank you so much. I echo Ruth's prayer and agreement with her prayer and what she said, and I'm truly overwhelmed by the answer to prayer. And, you know, as I left last time, I know I always come prepared with something, but I had been sitting there before my prayer, and a little voice said, and then add a note that you know, we don't know when disaster is going to strike, when any kind of tragedy is going to strike, and then how many people it will affect. And when I sat back down, I said, oh, darn, I forgot. But then walking away and driving away, I just felt so much peace, and knowing later on the magnitude of how it affected our city and how it affected it nationally, how we were a witness to so many states and countries and cities out there, and how we handled everything. So I am so encouraged by their prayer, and I'm encouraged by how we came together as a team, residents, fire officials, police officials. Like you said, there's so many people to name. The residents who came alongside other residents to house them, to open their house up to people who needed to stay there. And I'm just so encouraged about what God's going to be doing in the city as a witness to a lot of other cities and countries all over the world. So thank you again. And it was encouraging to hear you on the radio, seeing you on TV, and just how the word can get out and how we can work as a team effectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last speaker would be Dinah Wilson from Phoenix House, no? Okay. Okay. Well, the Phoenix is risen around here, huh? So that's good. Thank you. Okay, we have no other speakers. So we have consent calendar. Will you go ahead and read what you need to by title only?
Item number 2, resolution for repayment of low-interest loan for economic stimulus wastewater projects. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara stating the city's intent to reimburse any funds received from the State Water Resources Control Board for 2 renewable and reduced energy projects at the El Estero wastewater treatment plant. Item number 3, boating infrastructure grant from the California Department of Boating and Waterways, Marina 3, including recommendation A, that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara requesting a $50,000 grant from the California Department of Boating and Waterways for the development of a boating infrastructure facility at Marina 3 in the Santa Barbara Harbor. Item number 6, adoption of proposed amendments to the inclusionary housing ordinance, including recommendation B, that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending Title 28 of the Municipal Code to revise Chapter 28.43 and Section 28.92.110 with respect to expanded inclusionary housing requirements for smaller residential projects approved for construction within the city. Item number 8, contract for construction of the West Cabrillo Pedestrian Improvement Project, including recommendation E, that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara approving and adopting the findings required by Health and Safety Code Section 33445 for funding of capital improvements to the West Cabrillo Boulevard sidewalk.
Okay. I think we wanted to vote separately on item number 6, which is the inclusionary housing ordinance. I have one speaker who would like to speak on that. Isaac Garrett, please. This was introduced last week, and so we had our one vote, and then today is the second vote on it. Go ahead, Mr. Garrett.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Isaac Garrett, and I'm before you this afternoon to speak against the ordinance, not because it would be lowering the threshold from 10 units to 2. I believe the ordinance is unconstitutional, immoral, and just plain wrong. The ordinance takes an owner property without just compensation, which to me, again, is unconstitutional. The ones who benefit should pay. How does a property owner benefit from paying the city an in lieu fee to develop their property for which it's zoned without any other benefits to them, just to simply develop their property? Why not the employer? Why shouldn't they contribute to the employees' housing if they benefit from their labor without paying them a salary to whereby they can provide decent housing? Why should the landowner be imposed upon to bear more of the housing burden than other industries? Why should they? All industries profit and benefit from low wages. So why shouldn't they be mandated to shoulder a part of this financial burden? Pardon me. I know that sometimes you use the argument that, well, housing is necessary, it's essential. That is true, and I agree. But so is medical services. So is food. So is a number of other things that's essential. Are those industries, are individuals within those industries being singled out to work or provide their services or to pay a fee if they don't? To me, this ordinance is like sticking your hand in my pocket, pulling out my wallet, going through it, seeing how much money I have in it. Based upon the amount I got, you decide how much you're going to take to give to someone else who didn't earn it. That's exactly what this inclusionary law is doing. How would you like it if the state government treated your bank account that way? You put money in your account for your family's benefit. Well, that's the same reason why people buy property to develop, for the benefit of their family. Not for some governmental agency to confiscate their property without just compensation. The people who support this ordinance, how much of their property, time, or money have they contributed to the housing fund? They have the right to do that. It's always great for us to say what we are doing for others at somebody else's expense. It'll be greater if we participated at our own expense.
Mr. Garrett, could you please wind up? It's 4.5 minutes already.
Well, I'm really disappointed in some of you council members for supporting this ordinance. I thank you very much, Madam Mayor,
Okay,
for
thank
the
you.
opportunity.
Thank you. I don't have any other speaker slips. Oops, let me stop this. There. New clock here. It's a good one, but whoa. Okay, Mr. Williams.
Well, I think that what I was hoping to have is more of when we were talking about these amendments, more of a discussion of the amendments. What has, I think, unfortunately happened is that everybody comes and tells their views about inclusionary housing as a whole, and I think that's sort of not really what is before us. What is before us is that the way that the ordinance is structured is that development projects of 10 or more units are expected to contribute a portion of their development towards meeting middle-income affordable housing. But currently, projects under 10 units are not expected to, and I think that just doesn't make sense. I think that's a loophole. I think we should close that loophole. And if if this is the way we're going to do it, we should definitely have projects that are under 10 units count. I think that especially in regards to condo conversions, this makes the most sense, as this is something that is in fact taking away middle-income housing in most cases, because it's rental units that are affordable and replacing it with for-sale housing that often is not. So I think we approved this before, and I hope we will approve its second reading.
Okay, Mr. Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Mr. Garrett captured the essential moral underpinnings of this idea, which I also spoke about last time, but I devoted most of my comments last time to the specific flaws in these proposed modifications to the already flawed ordinance, and that's what I would like to speak about right now. In particular, last time I gave an example of how people in very small developments, the mom and pop developers so-called, are hurt by these changes. And my esteemed colleague on my left brought up the example of condo conversions and the terrible destruction that they have wrought in our community. I look at it a little bit differently. Supposedly the whole point of this ordinance is to provide affordable housing to people who can't pay for it. Now, regardless of whether or not that's a good idea, that's supposedly what's behind it. In reality, look at what these modifications to the inclusionary housing ordinance are doing. We've been told by community development staff that as a result of these modifications that we're voting on today, we are going to create a grand total of 1 new affordable unit per year. And how are we going to achieve that? Not with our money, as Mr. Garrett pointed out, with other people's money. Approximately 25 people who buy new houses in Santa Barbara will pay $18,000 apiece, so somebody else that we select gets a discount on their house. Now think about those 25 people. Some of them will be buying houses, perhaps condos, that were converted from another use, from an apartment or a co-op or whatever. Those residential units tend to be the cheapest in town. So if you wanted to provide affordable housing for entry-level homeowners, which is supposedly what this is all about, how would you do it? I would suggest the last thing you want to do is add a new $18,000 fee on exactly those houses. Imagine an apartment complex converted to condos. A lot of those, because ideally people would prefer single-family homes or condos with a little more separation. Those will be the least expensive units on average. And so you could have a young couple looking for their first home. They finally scraped up the money to pay for an inexpensive condo, let's say $500,000 in our current market. They get to pay an extra $18,000 so that somebody else, so they, along with 24 other people, will be conscripted to pay for somebody else's house. So the result of the changes that we're making to this ordinance are likely to increase the cost of the most affordable units in this town. And if we really care about entry-level homeowners, this is the wrong thing to do. I would also suggest that since this went before the Planning Commission, this is supposedly a planning issue, and the Planning Commission unanimously said this should be part of Plan Santa Barbara. There's no reason to rush into this. Maybe we should listen to that. Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that just to answer Mr. Garrett's comments, because I do respect Mr. Garrett. He's been a part of this community for a long time and quite an activist too. But I don't think this inclusionary housing ordinance is not unconstitutional, or I don't think our city attorney would let us do that. He's pretty astute at those kinds of things. Many jurisdictions have these. In fact, I think we found out more jurisdictions have these than we really realized. Second point was employers should pay for employees' housing. I think that I don't have a problem with Cottage Hospital building some housing, but some of the neighbors did. So, I think it's, sometimes that's a hard thing to have happen. Cottage Hospital is a large employer, but to see that smaller employers around town, it would be very hard for us to do that to the smaller employers, to ask them to build housing for their employees. And then you mentioned too health services that we don't, we're trying to provide housing, but you said something about health services, and I happen to know Cottage Hospital is a nonprofit. They do a lot of it's not charity work, but they do a lot of stuff in this community. And if any of you have had a Cottage Hospital bill, and you can see what they charge, and then your insurance company pays a lot less, and then they just eat the cost in between, it's totally amazing. So they are taking care of poor people in our town by providing them health care, is what they do. So, and then low-income, something about low-income people or middle-income, these people didn't earn the right to have these houses. I look at it very differently. I think that we need to help those people with low incomes around town, and we have, and I embrace that. I know some people don't. I've had that discussion with a couple people. One of them is the publisher of one of our newspapers, who did not believe that we should have any kind of housing that's government-owned for affordable. for low-income people. And I just, we are coming from two different places. I don't think we can ever agree. So I came to this discussion last week thinking I didn't know how I was going to vote. I was convinced that this is a good thing to try out, see what would happen in the next 6 months or so, talk about it in Plan Santa Barbara. So we'll see. I don't know how it's going to work. I know how it works with 10 units, and it doesn't work very well. There's not much going on there. There's so many other condo conversions under 10 units. So I want to see how it's going to work. If it does really put a chill on the market, if we think that there's some things that just shouldn't have happened or whatever, then we should look at it again. But right now, I will be supporting it as I did last week. Mr. Williams?
I just wanted to agree with you, Madam Mayor, and just say that to me what this is about is 700. If we just looked at the projects that are immediately in front of us next year, this would generate $720,000 in order to help provide middle-income housing. And just because that is not enough should not be an argument against doing anything. Doing something to help provide middle-income housing in this community is better than doing nothing. And I think that's what it's really all about, is we should, by a variety of means, and this is just one of those means, look to help provide middle-income housing that is affordable by people who work here. Otherwise, we are going to become a community of rich folks and commuters and that are coming in during the day. And we know that that's not a fate that really, in my opinion, makes this an attractive community.
Okay, so can we vote on item 6 separately, please? Let's do that one first.
I'll
then
move
we'll do-
item 6.
Okay. I'll second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Okay. And then the rest of the consent calendar?
Move the rest of the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Finance Committee, Ms. Schneider?
Oh, thank you. The Finance Committee met today at 12 noon to talk about the general fund fees and charges that are in the fiscal year 2010 budget. It's pretty self-explanatory. We just went over in a little detail, and there is a fee schedule available to the public if they want to see what those fees are.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Williams, the Ordinance Committee?
Well, the Ordinance Committee met today and actually had a very brief meeting about a momentous, really, matter, which is the extension of Measure E. Measure E will sunset, which is our governing charter amendment on the controlling of commercial growth. And essentially what we are looking at is an ordinance which imitates the charter amendment of Measure E and extends it till 2015. And this will be going to a Planning Commission hearing first and then to Council. The committee unanimously recommended it.
Okay. To go to the Planning Commission.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
To continue to try to control how much commercial growth happens in the community.
Thank you. Okay. Item number 10.
Item number 10, capital program budget for fiscal year 2010.
Okay. This was put off from last week because we had a whole discussion about a fire and all kinds of other stuff instead. And the inclusionary housing thing took a long time last week. So, Mr. Kelly, welcome back.
Yes, thank you. Pat Kelly, Assistant Public Works Director, City Engineer, sitting in for Chris. And today, have for you, Madam Mayor and Council members, a overview of the city's capital improvement plan, including the 6-year capital improvement program report, with a focus on fiscal year 2010, which is included in that plan. The capital improvement program, the plan itself, the 6-year plan, is a requirement of the city's charter. And the CIP includes a clear general, is to include a clear general summary of its contents, a list of all capital improvements that are proposed to be undertaken during the next 6 fiscal years. The charter amendment, the charter itself notes 5 years, but in our particular case, because we have the tradition of doing it every 2 years, we have a 6-year plan. It includes cost estimates, method of financing, and recommended time schedules for each improvement. The CIP goals are to provide a balanced program for capital improvements, given anticipated funding revenues over the 6-year period, and identify capital needs based on anticipated funding levels and shortfalls that may exist. Also provide a plan for capital improvements that can be used in preparing the capital program, such as the fiscal year 2010 plan. The definition that we use for a capital project traditionally is for an activity that creates, improves, replaces, repairs, or maintains a fixed asset with a total cost of over $100,000 and a life expectancy of greater than 5 years. There can be exceptions. For example, it will include plans to identify needed capital program needs and then specific other projects. The selection criteria considers mandated projects, for example, grant conditions, legal requirements such as water treatment regulations, contract provisions, or adopted mitigation measures for some city activities. Projects that address risks and or liabilities such as bridge repairs, projects that, if deferred, will result in significantly further higher costs later and or now causing deterioration of services, like, for example, road repair. If they're not done now, they'll cost more later. Projects identified as policy directives, for example, the energy projects and sustainability program that the city is pushing forward on, and normal maintenance of replacement projects that maintain levels of service that protect existing capital investment. Planned rehab, for example, roof replacements, so that we can achieve full useful life of our assets. So, what's new this year? The city's revenues, as we're all very familiar with, it's been a downturn in projected revenues for not just general fund, but many of our enterprise and special funds, parking, Measure D and Measure A, general fund sources. Also, uncertainty of some funding from the state, such as transfers regarding the state Proposition 1B. Part of the general fund budget strategy for fiscal year 2010 was a reduction of the general fund capital funding by close to $800,000 as part of the city's look at balancing the budget. Also, this year we have the Infrastructure Financing Task Force, which was presented to the council last October. We'll be talking about that in more detail. Also, some pleasant news, and that is the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, also known as the federal stimulus package, be reporting on. So, looking at the Infrastructure Task Force recommendations, a report to council will include a number of recommendations, which included attempting to make the capital improvement program a more useful tool in the future. Also included in the recommendations were fee increases that have been part of the budget process in fiscal year 2010, as well as realignment of responsibilities within the city, which is also part of the budget process, and also continued efficiency, increased efficiency of operations. Regarding the federal stimulus, we have some welcome news from our local Association of Governments, where I'll be showing you we have almost $4 million that have been designated for street purposes. And also there's a number of other items that have been identified: energy conservation, alternative fuels, water conservation, water quality improvements. And here's the table. I hope everybody brought their glasses. It has on the top $1.4 million that we had at last month when we first made this slide, and then subsequent to then, we have an additional funding, so now we're up to $3.7 million, and we're in the process of getting the authorization from Caltrans to move forward with these projects. And the focus of this is a term you've all heard is shovel ready. And the streets projects are ones that are probably easiest to be shovel ready. They do not require significant environmental review. That can be documented rather quickly. So what we're doing is that we're going through and we're taking much of it to do pavement improvements, much of like the worst streets in the city that we haven't been able to really afford to do in the past. Also, a significant part of the funding is going to be used to for repair of sidewalks, access ramps, and also improving traffic signals, where we'll have ped counters at our traffic signals. We found that pedestrians can make better decisions if they know how long they're going to be standing there. Some other options are that we're looking at alternative fuel vehicles. We've applied for funding to support our vehicle replacements with hybrid vehicles. It hasn't been approved as of yet. Also, potential is regarding the energy conservation with the Department of Energy. We have a grant application for close to $870,000 for energy efficiency projects within the city. Also, we've been informed that the community block grant program has received close to $290,000 that were, matter of fact, this will be brought to the council next week. That will identify 6 projects that will include shovel-ready projects at parks, community centers, and also more access ramps. Potential federal stimulus money include flood protection. We've been informed from the Army Corps of Engineers that they've received $600,000 for the Lower Mission Creek design. And then also we continue to monitor opportunities for water conservation applications, and also through the Bureau of Reclamation. We found that for the most part regarding that topic is that they're focusing on very large systems and rural systems, and we haven't fit into the category yet, but we're still applying. Also, the State Revolving Fund, we're applying for close to $4 million on that, and I believe Creeks is applying for over $7 million on environmental type projects. So the totals are in the 6-year capital improvement program report is a total of almost $550 million over 6 years. For that period, $192 million is anticipated to be funded, leaving $355 million unfunded. Looking at the fiscal year 2010, how that works out is that dividing up the proposed $29 million that's in the 2010 budget, we have close to $1 million in general fund and special revenue funds such as the redevelopment agency, streets capital, et cetera, at 14. Enterprise funds such as airport, waterfront, and public works, water fund, and wastewater, et cetera, is closer to 11.5. And then internal service funds, including the motor pool and information services, bring up the total. Of the total, close to $30 million, the general fund at about $1 million is 3%. So it's only a portion of what's proposed. For the rest of the presentation, I'll be recapping much of what has already been presented in the individual department budgets. You'll see many of the public works funds that you saw in detail just recapped here, and then representatives from all the individual departments are here to answer any specific questions regarding their individual capital program. First up is library, and if you look on page 97 through 104 of the 6-year report, summarizes their 6-year plan, which is close to $3 million. For this specific year, 2010, there's 334, which uses internal trust funds that they have that use to support the library. Parks and Rec 6-year needs is over 74 million, and you can see their items on pages 105 through 138 in the plan, and they have a total of 4 projects for 2010, totaling $482,600. The police department have one project this fiscal year, and their 6-year plan is on page 139, and that focuses primarily on replacing the existing facility, is the majority of that $55 million. And they have $185,000 for this particular year, and that's for a committed record management system that's moving forward as right now. Public Works General Fund is on page 158 through 170, and the 6-year need of over $7 million. And we have 2 projects of $150,000 each, one for ADA, American with Disabilities Act, implementation of our transition plan that was approved by council recently, and then also $150,000 is for facilities repair. Administrative Services, which includes the Information Services Fund, their 6-year needs are identified on pages 147 and 54, and there's 2 projects for $133,000. I think they would like to be $133 million. Streets Capital, 6-year needs, substantial, $237 million, and we have on pages 171, 255, and then for 2010 is over $3 million identified. Creeks restoration and water quality, you'll see on pages on page 71 through 90, 6-year needs of over $19 million, and they have 11 projects with a cost of $1,171,000. Here at the airport, there's more than just the terminal project there, and they have several components to their program of operating capital total, and for grants capital total, their 6-year needs are identified on pages 55 through 67. Downtown Parking Fund is for 6-year needs over $10 million identified on pages 142 through 157. And they have 4 projects identified for fiscal year 2010 at $1.45 million. Golf Course Capital, 6-year needs on page 95 through 96 of $580,000, and for this next fiscal year, 2 projects identified at $303,000. Here's another large infrastructure fund. The wastewater fund, 6-year needs are identified on pages 256 and 259 of $26 million over, and for this next fiscal year, 4 projects are identified at over $2.8 million. Water fund, 6-year needs on pages 260 through 268, over $73 million, and for fiscal year 10, over $5 million. One significant project on the horizon is the improved water treatment up at Cater, the ozonation project. Waterfront fund, 6-year needs, almost $13 million. That's on page 269 through 289. And for fiscal year 10, over $1.1 million, 12 individual projects. And in particular of note is $2.5 million identified for the first phase of the Marina One replacement, where they are expecting funding from the state for this coming fiscal year. Total capital then is at almost $550 million over 6 years. And as I noted earlier, for fiscal year 10, a program of almost $30 million. A couple items that are not in the capital program, that are in the capital program but not identified in the 6-year program, is the Motor Pool Fleet Fund. And for 2010, that was identified, the specifics of that were identified in a memo sent to council about 2 weeks ago. And that's a $2.2 million program. And then finally, the redevelopment agency program is noted here at over $6.5 million. And they have a significant parallel capital program development. Also is the utility undergrounding program for fiscal year 2010 at $359,000. And that is the end of the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the representatives from all the departments are here to answer questions also.
Okay. It's a little bit, I was looking at this, and then because of the fire, I couldn't finish looking at it, but I will study it. But the capital program is just what it says it is. It's a capital program, but it comes from enterprise funds as well as the general fund. But I saw that you took the general fund amounts out of there and put them together. But to me, it's a little bit confusing, because I guess when you're going to do something on the golf course, you take it from the golf fund, not from any public works money that might be there.
Madam Mayor, that's exactly correct.
Okay. Thank you. And I've got to look at that a little bit closer, because sometimes there's also going to be some matching funds. I know some of the Creeks Works, we get lots of grants and so on and matching funds. But the numbers that are in here, are those the ones that are just what we think our share will be, or what the overall cost is of a program that's going out for a grant? Do you know what I mean?
That's a great question, Madam Mayor and council members. And we've used different methods to report this over the years. And for example, on the bridge projects, we do not report the grant funding. Our method now is that we do not report the grant funding, because sometimes the grant funding we've been assured is going to be there in X year, and it doesn't. And then if it's in the budget, it gets appropriated, it creates all kinds of hassles. And so the intent is that the 6-year plan shows all those, the pairing up of the city's match and the grant funds, and then the actual capital program in the budget only has the city's funds in it.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Just
And
a
they're-
little bit confused. Yeah, go ahead.
Just so it's clear, that when we identify projects here, we try and show the total cost of the project if we're going to do the project, and then the projected funding sources. So if you see a project, it should be the total cost of that project if we're doing it. You know, for example, Mission Creek, the flood control, you wouldn't have it because that's a flood control project. But something like the bridges, we show it, and we try and identify them in different ways, one by department with the projected sources of funding. And I also just wanted to add to what Pat had to say. I think, as you recall, 2 years ago, we spent a lot of time on, I guess, the challenge of funding our capital program. And one thing the departments have gotten better at is identifying projected needs. But we haven't gotten any better at identifying new sources of funding to pay for those needs. And I think the problem is probably more acute, or at least we've identified the problem better than we did 2 years ago. I think the Infrastructure Financing Task Force did a good job of coming up with some recommendations. Unfortunately, the economy has gotten so much worse over the last year that I think we're spending a lot more time just trying to get through the next year. And I think the challenge is still going to be there in the long term. And this council and future councils are going to hear me continuing to harp that we have a serious capital need out there. And I think we're really going to have to keep working on finding new funding sources. And also remind everybody, this is not just unique to us. I think every local government in California, if not the country, is facing this situation. But if you look through this book, in some cases, they might be projects that are on a wish list, like an aquatics facility. It'd be, some folks would say it's a necessity, others would say it's a nice to have, but there are also projects in here that are, bridges, a new police facility, some that I think really at some point we're really going to have to get serious and deal with them. Probably now isn't the time because we're trying to get through it, but the problem is still there and it's pretty acute.
Okay, thank you. We've got one speaker. Shall we let him? It's Scott Burns. Come on up. Scott served on our infrastructure task force. We're very grateful for that.
Madam Mayor and City Council, I'm going to make, I think, 3 comments, but my first comment, I'm going to, if I can just make a 30-second comment. A week ago I was here and this got postponed a week, and for the last week I've been a volunteer with other members in the community with the Red Cross.
Oh, thank you for doing that.
And let me say that working there for 12-hour days, I am amazed at the complexity of what the Red Cross does as a very fluid situation, how they're able to get things done. And I'm going to read off some numbers that just to just one part of what they do. And I was over there this morning. Last Tuesday I was here. I ended up at the Red Cross building and I helped set up the Dos Pueblos evacuation center. That Wednesday morning that we had, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, we had 12 clients. The following day we had 98 clients. Friday morning we had 1,247 clients. Saturday 180 clients. Sunday morning 39 clients. Yesterday morning 25. This morning 16. Now there may be an issue later today and it may creep up or it may shut down. I'm not a representative of the Red Cross, but I'm just saying that they were able to do such amazing work. I just hope when you hear from them officially, it's amazing what they do. Anyway, now what I actually came here for, somebody has to speak for the capital project for the infrastructure. I was on the task force a year ago. We realized that generally speaking, the city spends about $1.4 million on maintaining the existing infrastructure, and we realize that we need to spend about $2.1 million on an annual basis. So we're falling behind. I don't think, as Jim mentioned, I don't think it's a time to catch it all up early, but let's not get any further behind. I'm also on the Park and Rec Commission. The Park and Rec Commission is asking on a capital project of about just under $500,000, $482,000. Of that, one of the projects is $50,000 to put some refencing around Shoreline Park. We are looking at the very least we can do and still make things safe. So please don't look at the numbers that you're getting from the departments as the line you can take and begin chopping from. Realize those are, they've already done all the chopping that they can do. So that was my one comment. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Falcone, then Ms. Schneider.
Thank you. And thanks for that work, not only on the infrastructure task force, Scott, but also with the Red Cross. I ended up out there Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening as they were getting hit pretty hard. And I, too, picked up intake sign-in sheets and started signing people in and doing some of that work. Actually, the convent next to the mission had just been evacuated, and so I had the distinct honor of taking care of the nuns. So that was, they're lovely people. And everybody, they were doing such amazing work out there, and people, it was very hectic at that point. It was about 6 or 7 o'clock or something like 7:30, something like that. But thanks to all those folks, too. Mr. Kelly, I have a question that may illuminate some of what Mr. Burns was talking about in your answer. I notice here on page 33 of the capital book, which is the summary of the projects for the 6-year plan, and the total looks like it's in millions, 547 plus million for the total that you've outlined. And then The unfunded portion of it is 350 some odd, which is 64% or 64.5%. Am I reading that correctly so far? Lawyers aren't
Looks like
accountants, so yeah. So let me ask you this to take it one step further. You outlined a laundry list of projects that you are applying for the stimulus package from various different departments. And there is a lot of crossover. As a great example is the golf course, actually, although it doesn't come out of the general fund, it is its own fund. But, for instance, the Creeks Department is doing an enormous project on the golf course, which comes out of the Creeks Department, doesn't come out of the golf course department. So there's a whole lot of Creeks kind of meanders, no pun intended, meander around the city and find itself in all kinds of places. So it is a little difficult to read and pull out and know exactly, especially for the public. We may know more about what comes from where, but the public certainly doesn't. And so I don't know how you address that, but the amount of money in total that you have requested citywide from the stimulus package, do you happen to have that calculation? If you don't right now, that's okay. My point is going to be that even if we get all our hopes and dreams realized, there's still going to be a tremendous gap of unfunded projects. Now, some of that is eligible for other kinds of grants besides the stimulus package, but I'm wondering, and maybe the infrastructure task force has a better beat on this, even if we get all of those grants as well, all the stimulus and all the grants, there's still going to be a fairly substantial chunk of unfunded. And I'm wondering if we have our arms around that at all. Do you understand my question? My rambling question?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Falcone, is that I do know for certain that the City Administrator's Office is looking at and tracking very carefully all available federal stimulus programs. And the ones that I repeated are noted are the ones that are the most promising, that looks like that we're going to have a good chance of getting a return on. There's other opportunities that we're pursuing and looking at. So I hope that answers the question as far as I don't have it with me, but I know that list is available and we are tracking it closely.
Would you at some point do the math and see what that total would look like, and then I will be able to subtract that amount from the two earlier amounts that the $350 million amount, just to give us an idea of what kind of grants or how much in grant money we're looking at, and it's not going to cover everything. So I'd like to take these calculations a couple of extra steps down the road. If you do that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, and we are finding that as much as we want to get a grant, many times the stipulations of the grant and description of what's allowed restrict us.
Well, like some of the state water stuff, we're not in that category. They're doing big infrastructure, and I don't know that we have anything that's going to meet that criteria, but ask for it anyway. So.
And regarding how to describe how projects overlap, we hope to answer that by having clear descriptions in the 6-year plan. And as we had noted earlier, is that we want this plan in the future to be sharper and more clear in that direction.
Ms. Schneider.
Thank you.
House.
Actually, I like the formatting of each individual piece here to show the check mark, whether it's funded or not funded, by which funds are funded or not funded, so that makes it a lot easier to see. And to emphasize that this book of more than $500 million worth of capital projects is the full list of things that are needed, and we know we can do things sooner rather than later. I'm curious to know the rationale behind not putting the infrastructure capital projects that are being paid for by the redevelopment agency in this book, because I can think of $20 million from 3 projects that's not even listed as projects. The HVAC system and locker room upgrades at the police headquarters, the Cabrillo Rec Center, and Fire Station 1, the seismic upgrade. None of those are in this book as a capital need, nor and as you said in your report, the redevelopment agency funds are separated out, when in fact it's a huge piece of how we're able so far to fund our, especially general fund, capital needs, Parks and Rec, police, and fire. So if you could comment, and I know this came to finance last week, and I didn't catch it, and I just caught it this week. So if you could elaborate on the rationale behind it, I'd appreciate it.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Schneider, is that it's my understanding it's just been the practice of the city, and I think that from what I've understood in the past, because I've asked the same question, is one that by having it separate and parallel, it just gives an opportunity to create a greater emphasis on the redevelopment work.
I mean, I think you need a redevelopment agency capital program budget booklet. That's fine, and that's important. But I think when it comes to our own city facilities, infrastructure needs, at least the projects need to be listed in here, and they're not, because that's significant, and that's a significant decision on our part as redevelopment agency members to use RDA funds for city buildings, and I know that's been a topic of discussion over the years. So perhaps the next round, whenever that happens, or the update, that's just a comment from one council member, but I think in order to get a full picture of all the different capital needs, we want to include everything. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's a good suggestion.
Yeah. Mr. House.
Just along those lines, with regards to the airport, we don't see the airport terminal isn't on the list.
That's correct. And airport is here, Hazel is here, but the practice has been once a project is funded, it's not, all the funding is essentially taken care of, and this reflects the request for new funding.
And the list, and perhaps Ms. Johns can just speak just to a moment. The list that, and again, this is more of an example. I'm not just picking on the airport, but it's as a liaison to the airport, it's one I'm a little bit familiar with. The list of two things: the airport terminal itself, which I think the public at large recognizes is our largest infrastructure, single big project that we've had maybe ever as a city. It's huge. So that's one piece, and how that's reflected in or not reflected here, and why. And the second piece is the list of items that are on here are all smaller projects, though pretty substantial projects, and they go to needs that the airport has had for some time, and now they're on the. Many of them are now on that shorter list, and they're going to be realized in a couple of years. And does this, what we see here, really reflect what the airport sees as as Ms. Schneider is saying, its complete list? I mean, if we put all the items that the airport foresees that it's going to need in the next 6 years in a bowl, so to speak, for us here, or are there things that are left out? So those are the two things.
Ms. Johns.
Mayor Bloom and Council Member House, to answer your first question about the terminal, it is, as Mr. Kelly said, it is fully funded. Bonds will be issued before the end of this year, so we already have the contracts underway, so it's not in the capital plan, which is 6 years going forward. Your second question on our list of projects, that is what we have identified that we can do in the next 6 years. If you consider the airfield project that we just completed, the runway safety area project really made major improvements to the main runway and the parallel taxiway in the safety overrun areas. So the other runways and taxiways are in decent shape, and those that are not, we've identified. So I think it is pretty
Okay, that's really good. So if the public is looking at the 6-year level of the CIP, what they're looking at is then what each of the departments and the enterprise funds have identified as within that time period what they foresee as their needs to be, some of which is funded, some of which is not, some of it will come in the first, or we have identified funding for it, some of it we haven't. And then the 2-year plan is what's really very likely to be implemented. That's what's the actual implementable part of the whole piece.
the part that we can fund and actually get done in the next year.
In the next 2 years. And that was and I think that was a management approach that Mr. Armstrong, I know you brought that along with you, the idea that we would really work on the things that would get on that 2-year list were things that were achievable within the 2 years. Am I correct in that understanding, Mr. Armstrong?
Yeah, basically when you look at this document, it's a 6-year planning document, but the first year essentially mirrors what is in the proposed budget. And if we had a 2-year financial plan, we would do a 2-year financial plan. And just so it's clear on the airline terminal, once we award a contract, and you've already appropriated the funding in the current fiscal year, so that's why it's not in the proposed plan, because basically the money is already, even though the project may take 2 years, once the money is appropriated and the contract's let, then that's all kind of accrued back to prior years.
Okay, very good. So again, if I were a member of the public and looking at this, and I was thinking, wow, you know, all this stuff needs to be done. Gee, why doesn't the city do anything? Mm-hmm. You'd have to really then have an understanding of what's ongoing right now and what's been accomplished over the past few years, and it's pretty remarkable how much has been accomplished. One more question, sort of in the same line, is the other bookend here, and that is when you build something or have a capital. A structure, a taxiway or whatever, you have to maintain a bathroom for Parks and Rec or something like that. You have to maintain it. And ongoing maintenance of these facilities, then I guess I'll just ask it as a question, is that reflected in here, or is that what shows up in the operating budgets of each of the departments or enterprise funds? And maybe you can help me with that from the airport's perspective.
In the airport's perspective, $650,000, I believe, of our budget that's in the capital program on an annual basis are funds set aside for to maintain capital assets. Because roofs cost more than $25,000, and in our case, in some buildings, over $100,000 to do a roof, it's part of the capital program. But also, in our operating budget, we have funds set aside for smaller items that come up. So we do it in 2 places, both the capital program and the operating budget.
And are you doing what, in the downtown parking fund, for instance, we're attempting to do, trying to get there, and I think we do it with vehicles and all, and that is creating a sinking fund of some sort, or some sort of a reserve aside for the eventual need of replacement or anticipated renovations that will be coming in the future? On some of your major capital items?
We tend to budget for those renovations in sections, in phases. One phase would be the planning and permitting phase. Then the second phase, once we have a real good idea on the true cost, and then we would budget over a couple of years. And then schedule construction when the funds kind of meet together.
I see. So there's a prospective side to this as well.
Right.
You're not waiting until something's in desperate need of repair and then hoping to achieve the funding for it. You're trying to work up to that if you possibly can.
That's correct. And of course, we do have at the airport, as you know, a capital reserve fund. That is an average of the last 5 years of our capital improvements that is set aside and is there in case of an emergency.
Great. Thanks for taking the time to explain all that. Thank you very much.
It's very good. Okay, we have no more lights, so thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Kelly. Thanks for being so patient with us and having us put you off a week. Thank you. Okay, we're on to item number 11, please.
Item number 11, updated El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District Guidelines. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara to adopt updated design guidelines for El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lamone.
Madam Mayor, City Council members, I'm going to begin staff's presentation today, and I'll be passing it off to Susan Gantz, who is our lead planner on this assignment. We are very pleased today to present for adoption our long-awaited El Pueblo Viejo design guidelines. These guidelines have been updated into what we believe is a modern document. That is, that the document has been professionally prepared through a graphic designer on city staff, and we have digital images that have been incorporated into the document. And as well as you'll see as we walk you through the document, the various areas that have been supplemented with additional text. The purpose of these guidelines, as you are maybe we very aware, are to provide the primary design criteria that are utilized by our Historic Landmarks Commission. These guidelines define the types of examples of buildings and structures that we strive for our El Pueblo Viejo landmark districts. And as you can see through reviewing the guidelines, there's specific language that has been developed over time to give applicants and architects an idea of the type of standards that we'd like to have and reach architecturally as well as for our historic district. The guidelines, next slide, next one, were last updated in 1995. We do have a draft prepared that has been circulated, and as you can see from our staff report, we are continuing to refine the document. We have errata sheets that have been prepared that outline the multiple reviews that are occurring as we head towards our final printing of the document. I do want to go over two recent clarifications that have been passed out to you right before the meeting. They involve a clarification of the Paseos map, specifically in and around the courthouse. We wanted to clarify how those Paseos read through that structure and that site. And then secondly, there was a late concern about a appendix section relative to floor area ratios. Some of the commissioners felt that there might be some misconstruing of that information with respect to a standard for floor area ratio for any building downtown. And what we did was added additional language to clarify that change is really to give additional data for consideration by the Commission. It is not establishing a new floor area design guideline for El Pueblo Viejo District. So if you have some additional questions, we can pull that up and discuss that amended language. Before I turn the presentation over to Susan, I do want to identify all the hard work that was involving our subcommittee members that met, I believe, over 24 times to go over the document. They participated in selection of photographs, taking photographs, reviewing multiple edits, and basically trying to get staff to develop a consensus on a lot of these sections. It's quite a collaboration, and I'm very proud that we survived it. We actually started back in the 2006. So over 3 years of continuing to have these subcommittee meetings. The board, one back, I don't know if we still have commissioners that are present.
Yeah, we do.
There we go.
They're sitting there.
The two commissioners that are present involve Louise Boucher, who worked, again, was one of our lead reviewers of text and so forth, and our former chair, Mr. Lavoie, which obviously, with his experience, helped us tremendously in putting forward the correct type of history references and terminology necessary to educate folks on what we're seeking. I also want to point out that our lead staff was, again, Susan Gantz. I gave her this primary task several years ago, and I says, let's get this going. And she did a remarkable job organizing the commission towards achieving the necessary photographs. I think we have several hundred photographs that were taken that we used to circulate and to finally weed out towards inclusion in our document. And finally, in the last 6 months, we had Heather Baker participate and try to give a last jump start to get it towards our graphic illustrator, our great designer, Miss Allison Gruby, who finalized the document in its current fashion now. And of course, Jake Jacobus reviewing all the historical data, making sure that, double checking that it is factually correct. So the changes are delineated by chapter. These are the primary chapters that are involved with the document. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan now. She's going to give you a quick walkthrough of the document. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Gantz?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Susan Gantz with the Planning Division, and I'm going to provide a quick preview of the new guidelines document, which is much larger, informative, and attractive, has a revised layout and a number of new features. And this, well, excuse me here. let's go back to that. The new cover is a watercolor painting of Libero Theater detail painted by local architect and designer Henry Lenny. And then the EPV Landmark District map has been reformatted and enlarged. And let's go to page 10 here. The introductory chapter includes new descriptions of the Cabrillo Boulevard and Mission areas. And then we have greatly expanded the chapter showing good examples of Hispanic architecture and the associated history with those buildings. The old guidelines described 9 buildings and had 12 black and white photos, and the updated guidelines describe 18 buildings with 66 photos, many of them in color, located in EPV. And Mr. Lamone is just quickly flashing through those, a lot of the beautiful courthouse details, medical offices in the 1500 block of State Street, the Meridian Studio, Libero, Arlington Theater. And then we've got, let's say I wanted to show the, Southern Pacific Railroad Station, beautiful Mission Revival. And then we also have, let's see what page are we on? One more. We also have 5 buildings located outside of EPV, which are beautiful Hispanic-style buildings, recently designated landmarks, Santa Barbara Junior High and Santa Barbara High School. And then 40. There's updated downtown Paseos map, which Mr. Lamone just reviewed with you, showing existing and future Paseo opportunities. And there's a new chapter on compatibility of new development within the existing environment, which is consistent with EPV ordinance criteria. And Chapter 5 is an enlarged landscaping chapter, which, in the interest of space efficiency in this document, also refers the reader to adopted ABR landscape guidelines. This is a new chapter with architectural design elements containing 27 color photos and text describing important design and construction details ranging from, arcades and loges, awnings, balconies, colors, cornices, moldings, and tablatures, just, every feature on the exterior of a building, and beautiful color photographs. We have some new hand-drawn architectural details to provide direction on the amount of detail needed for authentic Hispanic design, and these were drawn by local architects Tom Bollet and Craig Schallenberger. Wrought iron rejas and roof cornices. And we have a new chapter on sustainable architecture, which encourages applicants to design projects to be both sustainable and aesthetically appropriate. On page 65, we have examples showing successful screening of a rooftop solar energy collection array. A new technical appendix includes information on various project compatibility evaluation tools. And on page 71, Appendix F is a revised plant list with new color photographs of plantings, which is a really nice addition, I think. Appendix G has additional resources listed for further research into Hispanic design. And Appendix H describes other guidelines applicable within EPV and how to access them on the city's website. And that concludes a quick review of the draft guidelines, and I'd like to briefly show you a new online photo gallery that we have. Let me get to that. Let's see. It was created primarily so the HLC could refer applicants to a resource that provides additional examples of acceptable building materials. And when you pull this up from the web, this particular category is arcades. You have thumbnails down here, but if you go up here and click this button for each category, you have a gallery of photographs of arcades. And all these categories up here have photos available to look at: arches and lintels. I mean, everything here. And that concludes staff's presentation. And staff's available to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I have to say, I'm not liaison to any of the design boards right now, so when this came a couple weeks ago, I knew that there was a committee working, but that was about it. I was totally amazed by it. I read it cover to cover, and I have to admit I haven't read all the other guidelines cover to cover, because some of them are not as well written as this. This is very well written. It's very readable, and it's very wonderful, and I learned some things in it. So, and the illustrations and the photographs are just amazing. So I really want to thank the committee for working on this, but also just to everybody who had a hand in this, because it is really good. So that's my opinion. And I think it's everybody else's probably. Helene Schneider.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's quite an exquisite document, so thank you very much. And I can just think of the amount of hours it took the volunteers and staff to put this together, and the value behind this is really incredible. So thank you very much for this. And I was poring over this too. I did have a question on the Paseo page. So the ones that are red dotted lines are identified and not implemented, as opposed to the solid blue lines. And does that, for example, around Lot 11, I know I can get from Lot 11 to Haley Street, walk through. Does that mean it's just not pretty enough to call it a Paseo? And, or is it, there's still work in progress? Or can you define those two? Because
Sure.
there's some others as well.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Schneider, there was trying to be consistent with our previous circulation element document that had a Paseos map, also trying to look at developed Paseos that we feel deserve recognition. We do see this as a fluid document that over time will be able to redefine locations, but we were trying to anticipate where someone would actually appreciate walking through the space and identify it as somewhere that could be pleasant, pleasant atmosphere. So we do have some Paseos that aren't as developed as others, but we anticipate over time to have this document updated as part of the guidelines. And we do have potential sites that we're still working with development proposals that will either be slightly modified, but at least it gives them a clear indication that we'd like to see some Paseo connection through those properties, if possible.
Well, this is a great addition to all the other library of guidelines, and the online resource, I think, will be tremendously helpful. So thank you for the hard work behind this.
And thank you, Mr. House.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, a couple of things. One, it's strikingly beautiful as a document. It's just, it's lovely and it's complete, and it's open-ended in the use of the newer technology. And I think that the use of images, not just here, but in the if you will, reservoir of what's appealing in Santa Barbara is going to be a tremendous asset to the Design Review Board and to developers who are coming forward. It's my sense that David Gephardt would be very proud of this new revision, and something that it really is something that would, for all those who worked on the early version, really is a fulfillment, I would think, for them. And I would really, I don't know if they would be comfortable doing this. I know Louise Boucher is here, and Bill Lavoie, who worked both very, very hard on this. And I think for and is Alex here too? Alex is in the back, and what I would really like it if we could hear from them about what the impact of what they see the impact of this being on our design community here in Santa Barbara, because we could, go on about it here on the dais, but we're not the ones who are practitioners who are really needing this kind of information. And from the Design Review Board perspective, this tool, I have a sense that this is going to be a powerful tool. But if they would like to speak, I think it would be very appropriate and give it the presence that it deserves for the public at large. But otherwise, I just want to say thank you very much for this.
Ms. Boucher.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I don't have an awful lot to say other than staff has been fabulous on this, and it's taken us, 3 years, with many adjustments. The one thing that I have in my mind that I hope people will realize is when they begin to look at this is an awning and this is a this and this, we don't want them all on one building. Okay.
Good point.
So anyway,
Louise, if you have to explain that, we're in much bigger trouble than anybody ever thought.
Well,
yeah,
I've been on landmarks on and off for many years. I can tell you lots of things. So anyway, I think Bill is the one to get up and discuss this, but I'm so pleased, and I'm so pleased that you're pleased. Thank you.
No, it's wonderful. One of my favorite little paseos isn't on here, but I think it's on private property. I like walking through behind, sort of near the post office, walking through to Santa Barbara Street. But anyway,
that's actually a public street. So.
Yeah, and there's a fountain in there, and it's so quiet and wonderful.
No one knows it's there. It's lovely.
I know it's there. I love it. It's one of my favorite little places in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Mr. Lavoie? Thank you.
I'd also like to express my gratitude to staff for putting up with 9 commissioners, was it, over the years, and all of us with a different point of view. They succeeded in fulfilling my expectations, my years on the commission. You're often sitting there going, God, I wish we had an example of, why didn't we explain that better? Why don't we provide this information to the architects because they're here and they're blind? And I think they did a very good job of filling in the gaps and then telling us what gaps we needed to fill. I'm very happy with the collaboration that was inspired by staff, actually. The other part of it that I'm very happy with, and I kept on telling them this, the words are great, but I've got a wall of books in my library, and I haven't read most of them, but I know all the pictures in them. And they kept on, one more picture, and they kept groaning, oh, one more picture? Yeah, we need pictures, because architects are visually inclined. We tend not to read. We tend to look at pictures, and we're like, I think, half the population. And so I'm extremely grateful for not only the pictures that were included in the document, and we labored over, and it's sort of like, oh, no, if the sun was just here, and someone would go out and take another photograph, and another photograph, and another photograph. That's why it's such a beautiful document. A lot of work went into it. But also that there's this now online resource. I mean, we live in this digital age, and, we don't keep books anymore. We go to the net and we find documents and we find images. That they're now available to the designing public is a great asset, and thank you for funding that, speaking of money today. But again, thanks to staff for their great patience with all of us. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lavoie, for your work on that. Mr. House?
No, I just wanted to echo that last remark. I just really appreciate Mr. Lavoie's service and Ms. Boucher's and everyone else. The list of acknowledgments at the end is worth a read. A lot of people really participated in making this thing come alive.
And also dedicating it to David Gephardt is really wonderful, so thank you for doing that. Mr. Williams?
I just wanted to note that I think there is a new paseo coming in as part of a development proposal south of Haley in the old parcel for the Pep Boys property. It's something that and you can. And I don't know that it's going to continue through the whole block, which is what the ideal would be. But at least this small parcel, which is about, I guess, a third of the block, is one of those ones. So you might want to add it, and you can thank Madam Mayor and myself for mentioning it to the owner.
Right.
Because it was definitely something that we thought was important to continue to connect those. I also think that if we continue to produce copies of this, should probably give. I love that you guys gave all this. You probably should give the photo credits to Mr. Lavoie and Steve House and Robert Adams for doing those. It's kind of nice when you get those. But I, in addition to Louise and Bill, I just wanted to say that a special thank you to the Guidelines Subcommittee, Tom Bollea, Steve House, Suzette Naylor, Don Sharp, and the folks who helped with graphic design and layout. That's really, really nice of people to put in so much volunteer time on this.
And Pete, we have you in the back. Do you want to say anything? I know, I knew that, but and Alex, I know that, but I just thought, how nice of you to come. And I like your new office, by the way. And Alex, did you have anything you wanted to say? Okay, thank you. Well, I know this is the work of a whole team of people, so thank you so much. Did you have something else?
Madam Mayor, just as you make the
there you go.
recommendation to adopt, that you also state for the record that you are accepting the errata sheets, which will be used to amend the final printed document.
Okay, there are two of those, and we'll be glad to do that.
I'll make the motion to accept the staff recommendation, including the errata sheets.
And I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Very good. It's a wonderful document. Thank you so much. Shall we take a quick stretch, and then we have item 12. Oh, is it very short? Okay, well, come on up and let's just get through it then. Yeah, because it's actually, I was thinking it was a whole appeal, but this is a line thing. It's a lot area thing. It's nothing. It's not nothing, because I know it took a long time, and now I know why the school board, the school district is here. Thank you so much. Okay, go
Item
ahead,
number
Cindy.
12, introduction of ordinance pertaining to proposed rezone and general plan, local coastal plan map amendments to 210 and 216 Miggs Road and 290 Lighthouse Road, including recommendation A, the council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending chapter 28.12 zone map of title 28 of the municipal code pertaining to the rezoning of the property in the East Mesa neighborhood.
Okay, Mr. Busk, are you doing this one? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. The project site is located on Miggs Road and also at the terminus of Lighthouse Road. The project site consists of 3 parcels, 216 Miggs Road, which is currently used as overflow parking for Washington School, 290 Lighthouse Road, which is Washington School, and 210 Miggs Road, which is currently vacant. Here's a photograph of the site looking northeast from Miggs Road. This rezone and land use amendment request is part of a land swap and subdivision project that came about as a result of negotiations between the school district and the owner of 210 Miggs Road in an effort to resolve appeal issues associated with the Planning Commission's approval of a residential project at 210 Miggs Road. The existing parcels would be reconfigured into adjusted parcel 1 and adjusted parcel 2, and adjusted parcel 1 would then be subdivided into 5 single-family lots. The Planning Commission's approval of the 5-lot subdivision is contingent upon the City Council and Coastal Commission approving a rezone and land use amendments for the project site. Specifically, the rezone would be for 216 Miggs Road from PR SD3 to E3 SD3, and also general plan and local coastal plan map amendments from major public and institutional to residential 5 units per acre. Here's a visual depiction of the changes that are requested. The existing zoning for 216 Miggs Road is park and recreation with a coastal overlay. And the proposed zoning is E3, which is single family with a coastal overlay. And as you can see, the proposed zoning would be a continuation of the existing zoning to the east and south of that site. The existing general plan and local coastal plan designation for the site is major public and institutional. And the proposal would change the land use designation for this adjusted parcel 1 to residential 5 units per acre, which would be consistent with the proposed E3 single-family zoning. City staff and the Planning Commission support the proposed land use and zoning changes because it would allow for development of housing in an infill location close to services, recreation, and transit opportunities. It would be consistent and compatible with adjacent and nearby zoning, development, and land uses. It would be consistent with the local coastal plan text discussion of development in this area of the Mesa. It recognizes the fact that the 210 Miggs property is in private ownership, and both the city and the school district have declined to purchase it for either school or park purposes. And finally, it would allow new housing to be located in a more acceptable location relative to the school as compared to building housing on the 210 Miggs Road property. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the requested land use and zoning changes. And I would like to note that we've received a letter requesting additional policy language as part of the local coastal plan amendment. Planning staff has considered this request as it's been requested early on in the process. However, we don't believe that it's necessary, as compatibility between land uses is something that's considered through the development review process as well as our design review process. So we don't believe that additional text is necessary in this case. Also, you received a letter from an adjacent homeowner identifying some areas of concern with the subdivision project itself. Staff and the applicant have been working with that neighbor to address these issues as appropriate. However, they do relate more to details of the project and subdivision rather than the rezone and land use requests before you today. And finally, I want to note that Planning Commissioner Jacobs was here, but she did have to leave. And I just want to note that she was here to express the Planning Commission's unanimous and wholehearted support for this project. Thank you, and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions, Ms. Falcone?
I don't really have any questions. I just wanted to thank you both for coming to this amicable, although it took a long time, because I remember having this discussion starting, I'm going to say 2.5, maybe even 3 years ago or so. 2005. Oh, well, there you
4
go.
years.
Okay. It's even longer. Time flies when you're having a good time, though, I suppose. And the last piece of the findings where it says that the housing and the school property would be so much better utilized if flipped. And I think people recognized that in 2005 as well. I remember mentioning it. But things take a while, and I'm glad you all came about. When you're ready, I'm happy to make a motion, but other people may want to speak.
Okay, Mr. House?
I had the opportunity to see this on Planning Commission way back when, and it's so nice to see this come around this way and get this. A silly little question, but going back to old 2002, I might remember back that far, the question about utilities undergrounding, and I'm trying to remember, and I should have gone by there just before today and just double checked. Where does that stand? I mean, is there right out in front? There's going to be some required undergrounding of utilities for the project itself.
Yeah, Mr.
There, Mr. Allen.
Can we get a site plan up there? I don't have a pointer, but in the reconfiguration of the lots, that overhead power line that was originally being undergrounded as part of the previous project at 210, that's now on the school property, so it's not part of this project.
So because now the property that's going to be developed is adjacent to the other condominiums, right? Then it's not over where that other line. So that's still going to stay up there, that same pole, right?
Yeah.
That's too bad. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, this is pretty straightforward. We went out on site visits. We talked about it. What was that? I guess 4 years ago, and I thought I thought people had forgotten about it or something. I didn't know what was happening. So I'm very glad to see it come back to us because it makes so much sense. It just is a logical thing to move the housing next to the housing and have the school uses next to the school. It sounds so easy, doesn't it? It wasn't that easy, and I understand that. But I'm glad that it's finally come back to us this way. Mr. Williams?
Well, I just want to say that what this really does is it just is a good example that of two parties coming together. I know it took a while to work out, but in a way where these two parties can both have their interests met, where there is a development right on one property, but it didn't make sense that was the one that got developed with the housing, and so by doing the swap, the property owner gets to enjoy his development right and build the housing that they're going to, and the school can also make sure that the housing is distant enough from the school properties so that they can continue to use that school unimpeded or without sort of the problems that arise from housing being too close to a school. So I just think it's a great example of people that are not coming here in the form of an appeal, but are coming here in form of a rezone to meet both of their interests. And with that, I'll just make a motion to approve it.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And I want to thank the school district, too, for doing this. It's good. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll see the development sometime, I think. Thank you very much. We have a closed session, and then we will adjourn out of that closed session. Will you please read it for us?
Item number 13, conference with legal counsel pending litigation.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, did you want to take a break for a while and then go into the closed session, or? Okay, we're fine with, all right.